Chapter 11, The Sack of Lawrence. The movie was one of the Freddies, and it felt really good to scream and dig her nails into Mike Grubber's arm. Mike pumped popcorn into his mouth in steady rhythm. It's not that scary, he said with his eyes glued to the screen. In the flickery light, he looked green. Sally, Derek, everyone looked ghoulish. Only Anne seemed unaffected. She watched the movie as if it were a video on photosynthesis. Afterward, they all went to a frozen yogurt shop where Dana's dad was to pick them up at 11 o'clock, but discreetly and visibly. Cool movie, Derek said. I like part 2 better, though. Derek didn't bother ordering a sundae. Just a long spoon so he could eat everybody else's. They had a juicy argument over whether part 2 or part 3 was scarier, with gruesome evidence from each, as compared to part 4 and part 5. The thing is, those were more violent, but less psychologically terrifying, Mike said. I'd have been happy to stop with the original, said Sally, swirling her white chocolate sundae into mush. Nobody asked me, but I think the movies are stupid, Anne told them, not like real. Derek dared her. Name one thing scarier you've ever seen. The bones in Dana's upstairs, she said quietly. It's really scary to think what happened to that girl. Scary to think we might not even ever know. Tell them about the fire, Dana. My house burned down. What? Mike yelled, and a gray-haired pair of dumplings across the room gave him a searing look. Well, it was 135 years ago. Oh, I see. It spontaneously regenerated. Did you know you can chop off a piece of a flatworm anywhere and it'll grow itself back? Very interesting, Mike. Gross, Sally wailed. Hey, I just presented the example to explain how Dana's house grew back. Drop it, Gruber, Derek said. Tell us what happened with the fire. My house was sacked. Remember last year on Kansas Day, Paul Cardenas did that oral report on the sack of Lawrence? I don't remember. I must have been home in the sack that day, Mike quipped. Or sacked out in the back of the room. Not bad, Derek. Or ransacking someone's locker. I don't get it, Anne said. Subtleties of the language, kid. Idioms, said Mike. Idiot, Derek muttered. Dana, what are they talking about? Well, Anne, it's hard to explain. Guys being so immature and all. Mike sat up straight as a piccolo and said, Tell us about the sack of Lawrence, so please, please. Not because you asked, Dana deliberately turned her back to Mike. They practically burned the whole town down in 1856. Sally asked, even the university? This is before it was built, explained Dana. And here's the weird part. Lawrence wasn't burned just once. Twice. After the first time, they rebuilt everything super fast because everyone was so mad and so determined to outsmart those pro-slavery guys. Then, 7 years later, some crazy named Quantrill bops into town in a Confederate uniform with a few other lunatics, and they go on this orgy of murder and mayhem. Oh, but they're chivalrous knights. They spare all the women and children, shoot about 140 men, though, and burn down a couple of hundred businesses and homes. Nice guys. Mike asked, your house got hit a second time? I don't think so. How do you know? Asked Sally. Tell them how we know, Anne. Anne's elfin face clouded over with sadness because Elvira was already dead. She was already sealed in that room. Dana's father dropped everybody off, and at the last minute, Anne invited Dana to spend the night at her house, if she brought the journal. Staying at Anne's was always an adventure. Where Dana's house had 11 rooms, 12 counting Elvira's home, Anne's had 3 rooms. There was one for the brothers, one for the sisters, and one for cooking, eating, and watching TV. But because all the brothers and sisters were older than Anne and went to high school or college and also worked at all the 7-Elevens in town, there was never a time when everyone was home. Also, there was never a time when no one was home. So Anne and Dana got into their giant sleeping teas and piled their pillows into a corner of the sisters' room to read some more of the journal. Since the fire, they'd promised they'd only read it together. Anne found the page quickly. May 31st, 1856. There is good in all thy works. With our house destroyed, I have left this slave escape enterprise behind me. James and Rebecca are overjoyed. We have taken refuge with the Mockins. Their house miraculously escaped the ravages aflame. It's quite crowded, all of us together, but the Mekons are fine Christian folk, and we are all making do. Caleb's gone to Topeka for a few days. When he returns, we'll set about rebuilding. Some of the men had a wood sawyer's tournament, so there would be logs aplenty for all the building. Young Will Bower's father won by a count of 3 logs. His back wall went up first as his prize. We're fortunate that we've money to buy lumber from the mill. Thy kindness is ever bountiful. Anne said, Here, Millicent, just tell us about how they rebuilt your house. All the neighbors helped. Very nice. She skimmed a few pages. This entry is dated June 14th, 1856. The United States Congress has refused to accept Caleb's Constitution. O Lord, all his work on the side of right. Caleb laments that we shall not become a state this year, and not without more bloodshed. June 18th, 1856. I am weary to the bones, for we've moved into the first floor of our house today, the hottest day yet of the summer. There's still the upstairs to finish, and Mr. Madison and his apprentice are working at that. There are so many houses to build since that horrid day. James is too old to sleep in a loft. Mr. Madison's building him a proper room. How old do you think James was? Anne asked. Our age? Maybe a little older. Maybe he was shaving already. How old is that? My brothers are in college and they don't shave much. Asian men are different. I think James was extremely hairy. If you look like them that way, Anne said skeptically. Okay, go on. Anne skimmed the page. This is just dull things about wood, the split logs for the floor, how they quarried the stone of the fireplace. Oh, look at this. I've asked Mr. Madison to build a good-sized closet in the north bedroom. It would be a place where James could play his violin without making us all grind our teeth. Thou knowest, Lord, that James is a sincere musician, but not a gifted one. He played the violin. How romantic, Dana cried. Anne read on. June 20th, nothing much. June 22nd, oh, this is sweet. I do believe these are the happiest days Caleb and I have shared. What with the Constitution business temporarily put aside, we've been like a bride and groom feathering our new nest. I blush to write, he's been courting me. James watches out the corner of his eye. I believe he's of an age. At least puberty, Dana said. At least we're in the right ballpark. But Anne was deeply engrossed in the journal and didn't answer. Dana, listen. But then tonight, it all changed back. Caleb is in Leavenworth for the accursed trial of Barnaby Watts. The flag's now no longer out there, but somehow the girl knew to come here, and now she knocked on the door good and firm, and I thought it was Edna Mackin come for a cup of tea, but there stood this girl, small and sure in manner, speaking like a southern lady, but she is as dark as the tree outside my window. She says, Thou sent her to me. She says she will never get to Canada, but she's meant to help others on their journey. My stomach did somersaults when I saw how unwavering she was. Now I eagerly await and dread tomorrow's sunrise. Anne put the journal down thoughtfully, and when she lifted her eyes to Dana, they both said, Elvira,